What was that you were playing?
Shh, we're live.
See, now I'm thinking, maybe it means you're the evil man, and I'm the righteous man. And Mr. 9mm here, he's the shepherd protecting my righteous ass in the valley. Maybe it means, or it could mean.
That was horrible. It's 11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music until dawn. Right now, we're going to get words from our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. For the Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to our Daily Gun Show. Come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern, and we talk about guns for about an hour. So today we're doing a very controversial topic and going off the rails a little bit, because normally on Mondays we talk about behind the scenes and how to use social media, and people might be getting a little sick of that because we've been talking about it a lot for good reason. People have been getting jerked around, but I figured do something different today and talk about 9mm. So kind of butchered the beginning there, but that's what you get for nothing, because a lot of you aren't paying nothing for this. So we got people joining us. I'm locked on Dano for some reason. We've got Cycle Camp jumping in from Connecticut. Thanks for jumping in.
Hey there, and I apologize for all my senators.
I had my thing turned up really loud. Then we got Dano jumping in from Illinois.
Just call me Mr. 9mm.
There we go. And then we got Ted jumping in from Nevada. Thanks for joining.
Good evening to everyone.
I'm down here in Arizona, so we got links out to a couple other people over on the Gun Channel side, and what that means is we are broadcasting on YouTube, and we are simulcasting over on Gun Channel stock. It is a community we built 5 years ago now, and a platform where people can get together and chat about guns, post stuff like this, or all kinds of different kinds of content, programming, photographs, videos, whatever. So it's a way we can collaborate on projects and keep the word out, or get the word out on stuff that's going on that matters. But tonight we're taking a break from anything that matters, I guess, and I figured we'd talk about 9mm. So I want to start the show out with this: what would happen if there was no 9mm? What would the world be like? Anybody want to take a stab at what would it be like?
Sure. We would all spend more time perfecting other types of ammo like 45 and whatnot in our firearms instead of wasting our time with 9mm.
It would be a Tokarev world.
Oh, you think 9x25 would be? That's what Tokarev is, right?
Yep.
Maybe
is Makarov.
Oh, not Makarov. Tokarev.
I know, just to differentiate it. 9x18 is the shorter one, so that's Makarov, the smaller gun. 9x, what'd you say? 9x20?
20 or 25.
20, yeah, 25, I think.
Almost neck down. That's a little guy.
Good. Much larger pistol is what that's what I was saying. So that's how I remember the two. Is 25 is the Tokarev, it's the bigger gun. 18 is smaller than 9mm. It's a smaller gun. But anyway, you would say that the Russian calibers would win,
or Brownings.
So meaning
380.
380.
That's a Browning caliber.
So it's going to feed well. It's also a slightly longer cartridge, and so it can get velocity if that's what you want. So it's the perfect round. It's going to feed well. It can go fast if you want it to. You can download it if you want it to. It'll do anything.
You don't think 357 is a better round?
For what and where? What are you talking about? Revolver and a revolver.
For self-defense.
But in a pistol, it makes a huge frame. Huge gun.
Well, 9mm is a pretty short range item, isn't it?
I mean,
well, gunfights are short range usually.
Yeah, and a bottleneck cartridge is always going to have less inherently feeding issues than a straight wall cartridge.
Because you're saying
Speed
ejection, do the ejection, because going in, it would think it'd be easier.
That's what I mean. The bottleneck cartridge would go in easier.
But it might have trouble ejecting because it's got issues with expansions, necks, and blah, blah, blah.
I guess not as compared to a 380. I guess if you're going to compare to a rim cartridge, I guess I would agree because there's less to grab there compared to a 357.
So where'd this 9mm come from? Like 1908 or some stupid year? And then a bunch of Nazis made it and used it in the Parabellum? Or the, what is that thing called? Why am I drawing
Actually, it existed decades
For war, right?
decades before there was anything to be known as the Nazis.
Nazis were born, right? Born out of people, and those people invented the 9mm. That's all I'm saying.
People also invented the 357 Magnum, but we don't lump them all together.
Well, those are good people, though. Anyway, so 9mm back in Germany. What is it? The P-38 was the first 9? It was made for the gun, right? It was made for that broomstick. No. The hell, why can't I remember what the hell?
The broomstick Mauser originally came with a different cartridge.
It was retrofitted to the broomstick. I'm saying the wrong gun. It's the Nazi gun or whatever.
You think of the Luger gun, and then there's the broomstick Mauser.
The Luger, I think, is what I'm thinking of. Isn't that what it was invented for?
Well, that's what it's typically called. That's its alias, right? And it was designed in Germany in 1902.
But I thought originally it was the 7
years before the First World War.
Okay,
So it probably caused the First World War. Didn't the guy get shot with a 9mm?
No, that was a 380.
He got shot with a Browning's gun.
He got shot with a Browning, yeah. A Fabrique Nationale version of a Browning gun.
But okay, so I'm just trying to put a time frame on it. So basically, before the First World War, and 9mm would never happen. So we'd be left with the Browning calibers, 380 and 25, I guess, and then 45 wasn't around until 1911. So 08 or something. So there was other revolver calibers like Ted Keith's.
Elmer Keith's contributions.
Elmer Keith, we're talking pre-World War I. That dude was a couple minutes ago.
He's like contemporary, yeah. But remember, the 9mm Luger, they were looking for a compact round that was lethal at only 50 meters.
In Germany.
So 150 feet, that's all they were looking at. Well, 160 feet, whatever. Like, just you got to round off all those little parts of a yard that don't count.
So trench gun type of thing, or before? This was before the trench warfare was a thing, right?
No, I think you're right. I think it was just for up close and personal, pistol stuff.
Yeah, World War I didn't start till 1914.
30 years before the Nazis. So the Nazi was 30 years old being born when the 9mm was being born. I don't know why that's such a reach for people. It was made by the people who made Nazis. So.
But it was not made by the Nazis.
Well, let's put it this way. 9mm existed before the Nazis. You all agree. So I'm going to start saying the 9mm created the Nazis. How about that?
So I came in a little late. I apologize. Do you want to know the first pistol specifically designed to fire the 9mm, or the first pistol the 9mm went in?
Oh, I guess I was just trying to put a time frame on it so we knew when to delete it from the timeline. Because what we're talking about is a theoretical world without a 9mm. At least that's what.
Because, yeah, the first gun that the 9mm went in was the Luger, and the first gun designed specifically for it was the high power. That's what Google's saying, at least.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and if Bob was here, he's not here to rip that in. That's a thing. But that was because Browning that's why he died over there, because they made him do that. There's Bob, probably.
And actually, that round got presented to the British Small Arms Committee, and it also got submitted to the Americans. So it's not really a German round when you get right down to it.
The other gun you might have been thinking about, G. Webb's, was the Walther Model 6 of 1915.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking the Walther, because basically the Walther story is Walther was making rifles, finding his business making rifles. He successfully sends his kids off to college. And his one son came back from college and said, "Hey, Pop, we should make a semi-auto gun." Like, all right, let's roll up our sleeves and do it. And together they made the first Walther. The rest is history.
And the big dog pistol cartridge back then was a 32.
Right, because remember, we're talking Europeans. People are just
Yeah.
down like, you know.
6.5 or something like that. 5.6, 6.5. I don't remember which one it is.
Which explains why they had 16-shot revolvers carrying calibers like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen, let's get crazy here. Have you guys ever seen any kind of in-depth kind of research where they would have talked about, and I've seen this kind of stuff for the 45, the development of the 45, right? The reasons why. But I've never seen, like, was it that people were using those little puny calibers? And or was it just that by brandishing or by having possession of a firearm was enough to scare people off at the time? Because it was, you know what I mean? Was it the need for firepower? Or there wasn't the need for firepower, I guess is what I'm saying? Is that why they didn't really develop the big stuff until later?
To my knowledge,
That's a huge distance when you get right down to it.
Well, they did have big stuff. It's just not in a semi-auto loading. They had it in revolvers.
Wasn't the 9 originally an execution firearm?
Probably. It sounds like the kind of
We had 44s and 38s and revolvers long before the auto loader.
No, I think that was a lot of police departments and you know, like MPs and stuff in the military. You know, they you know, give a guy a gun that's good at a moderate distance, but that would still end up stopping somebody if they hit them right, though. You know, even back then, I mean, the problem back then is that the 9mm ammo back then was crap.
oh yeah,
You know, I mean, the reason the 9mm works today is because they put so much effort into redesigning the projectile to be more effective.
well, and the powder has gotten so much better.
Let me throw a question out there. Do you think it's possible that that they kept it that way intentionally so that if somebody had a negligent discharge, it would be less likely to travel some distance and thus hit an innocent person versus if it went, you know, a couple hundred yards and fell to the ground?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question. Do you mean that they were purposely carrying around puny calibers and low charges because they were worried about collateral damage?
Yeah, I said, what do you think about the idea of that?
Well, I mean, the big dog in the police department before that was the 38 Special, right? Which is a fairly, you know, when you get right down to it, it's a fairly weak round.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming they were still carrying revolvers in the police force.
Yeah.
I mean, I have advertisements from 1911 out of newspapers specifically to police officers to buy revolvers. In fact, I think I showed G-Webs those.
I'm confused on the caliber situation because, I mean, in a war situation or whatnot, our firearms use 22 as a caliber. We have in World War I, it was fought a lot with like 22 long rifle. You know, and today we use 223. You know, so I don't know.
I don't know if you're getting 22 long rifle in wartime, but that was only for training guns.
Right.
I think
it's really about mass.
You're talking 30-06s in World War One. I mean, you're talking 1903 Springfields and stuff. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying you're saying the caliber or having you know, the caliber at the bigger caliber being more devastating. Yet we use the M16 with the 223, which is really only a 22 caliber.
Well, because we're talking about an incomplete formula. I mean, caliber is one aspect, but it's also total mass and the velocity of that mass.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
I mean,
I was only confused because only caliber was mentioned to it, and that's why I was asking.
But you're also taking.
You're saying.
And in regards to why we switched calibers for wars, the way in which wars were fought drastically changed.
Yes, along with the technology that made bullets and the powders what they are today.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole reason they went from fixed machine gun positions to walk and spray was because of the change from trench, getting away from trench warfare. Because, as soon as they had the effective tank, trench warfare was gone. That was the end of that shit.
Oh. Walking fire was only performed in World War I, as it was a failed idea from the start.
Well, I know that pistol production and the concept of making stronger, better semi-auto and just better pistols in general is largely credited due to the fact that pistols performed better during trench warfare when they did raids on the trenches. And so there was this big push for having because a big old rifle was difficult to wield when they were invading trenches, and a lot of soldiers, they realized, would do better off with a more powerful handgun. And that's where a lot of that production came in.
It's a confined space, no different than going inside a house or an apartment or something like that, going in those trenches.
Well, that's why they cheated and they used shotguns.
Which the Germans called us, what did they say? We were barbaric?
Yeah, we were mean. But we're barbaric for using shotguns. So,
and yet we were both lobbing gas artillery shells at each other, and nobody called that barbaric.
Yeah, nobody.
But it was the short barrel shotguns that offended them.
Yeah, not the poison gas.
In order to play host here, where we started out with the origins of the 9 in order to remove it from the timeline. So coming back to modern days, would we have gone smaller? The things like the small Glocks and things being in 380? Or would we have just gone full 1911 45, small guns with big 45s in them? Would it have gone 40? 10?
I think the intermediate size cartridge, I sort of agree with Dano. I think things like the Tokarev and the Makarov probably would have been even more popular if there had never been a thing called the 9mm. Especially the Tokarev. I mean, that's a hell of a round. I love that thing.
And another one I'll throw in there is it would have pushed for the development, or I should not the development, but the acceptance of what I'll call the rimless 38.
When I was in the military, I was a medic, and we carried a 45. And they trained us that the 45 was designed that when you're working on a patient, someone comes up, you knock them back with the 45. You're knocking them away from them. The supposed German version of that was supposed to be the 9mm, something at a close range that was able to knock somebody out of the way for you to continue performing your duties.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of horse shit too, because anybody, that's the whole bit about stopping power and knockdown power and all that, and that's been proved so many times. It's not funny.
It's just like a bayonet. A bayonet will go
back 14
somebody. A bayonet won't push anybody backwards.
Well, I think that the science behind it, obviously, we all know is wrong. But it does that to the wording and the phrasing and the military requesting something like that be built. That sounds exactly like the thing to be designed. And that's and the designers, of course, gave us the 45 and so on with that goal in mind, I think is what. And then they just never corrected the science.
Right. I think that they just simply misspoke when they said knockdown power. What they actually meant was more lethal, instantly lethal.
Yeah, single shot stop.
Yes, that's what they meant. Although that's clearly not what they said.
I think that if you took the 9mm out of the timeline, they would have developed the 10 sooner. And instead of getting the 9, they would have rushed to the 10. The FBI would have gotten a hold of it at the same time period, and then we would have still ended up getting the 40, and then 40 would be the new 9.
You don't think that the terminal ballistics of the 38 would have pushed the development for a 38 rimless cartridge?
I'm not
No,
going to say.
would end up with a 357 SIG. Why go to a 38?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anything, I think the 357 SIG.
Well, either one of those, they're both based off the same basic.
But the problem is they're bottleneck cartridges. Manufacturers
is, but if you went with a straight wall 38 and just changed the type of rims on the cartridge, that would work in a semi-auto. You just had to get the acceptance of it.
I wonder if it would have made the 40 more popular.
Exactly.
No, and I agree with that. I just think that my vote. The reason I think the 357 SIG would have had issues is because manufacturers classically had hated bottleneck cartridges for handguns. And I think that you're right. They probably would have tried to do some straight wall 38, but that would have been found to have been weaker potentially than carrying a 38 special in a revolver, given the manufacturing capabilities at the time and like the fear of frames on semi-autos. And I think that would have pushed the development of the 10 sooner, which of course would have led to them falling back to milking the 10 back to the 40.
Either a 10 sooner or some variation of the 357 loading sooner.
All right.
Well, that's essentially what the 10 is.
And then we'd be shitting all over that one, saying it was a horrible round and people shouldn't carry it, and they're all weak women.
But that's because they got this 9mm to use as a gold standard. If it was 380 and then up to 10mm, maybe just something else in the middle, 45.
A 45 auto rim.
Well, I'm going to take a moment here to break in, because I ruined it for the flow of the show there anyway, and let's do a bracket. That's customary for live chats on gun channels. So we're going to roll up our sleeves and take a look at our bracket tonight. So we're going to go from left to right. And cycle count. Are you going with 9 or 45?
For
caliber, which one's better?
ooh.
Don't you have to have something compete against 9 and something compete against 45? And the way you wrote that,
I asked midnight range for a bracket, and this is what I got. So going with it. We're going with
I'm going to go with the 9.
Okay, we got one for the bed. Okay, Dano?
it's which one I think everybody should shoot. Is that the question?
Which one's better?
Oh, better? Oh, the 9.
Oh my goodness, there's something wrong with this bracket. Dog.
So, assuming that I'm taking a real world compatibility, like work concerns out of it, I'd rather have the 45.
There we go. Now it's working. Ted?
45 all the way.
Boom! 45 wins. We solved it tonight. But we'll continue talking just to.
No, just the only reason I ever got into really carrying 9mm and 9mm became like my EDC was due to my job and the fact that everybody had to carry the same caliber. Otherwise, I've always picked either 10mm or 45 over it, and I picked 10mm out over everything when it comes to semi-auto.
I don't know. I heard really bad things about the 10, about it not being fully developed properly. But then again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know.
Well, come on. We're going to sit around, so now we're going to put 9mm back into this. We're going to put 2 timelines down. One, say add a timeline that has 9mm in it, and then another timeline, our alternative timeline that we're coming up with tonight with no 9mm. So,
I tend to agree with Dano. I think they would have worked on the 38 or /357 and made that into a rimless cartridge.
Yes.
Because you take the advantage of the 357's power. They're roughly the same bullet size. I think somebody, two or three different people said they were almost the same size, like, .355 or something like that. Or somebody said they used a 357. Al Glider or Gilder said they used 38 short. I never seen a 38 short. 38 special, 38 super, 357, and 9 all use a 357 size bullet.
Yep.
And I think that would have been a good compromise between like Dano said, not using a neck cartridge. To get you a straight wall cartridge with a little bit more gas to it. So I think 357 is awesome. Personally, I think if you're going to, that's why you only gave me the choice between 9 and 45. But if you'd have put 357 in there, I think the 357 is the way I would have gone. Because that's a hell of a round.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
But I think that if 9mm hadn't been around, they would have either the 380 would have been around a lot longer, or they would have got to a rimless 38 special / 357, and that's where they would have stayed.
Is it possible? Is it possible? I mean, okay, so that's a valid. Going with like the paralleling what actually happened, how we went to autos. Is it possible that without the 9, without that like vanilla gold standard right in the middle, that everything would have been too big or too little, and instead of developing something in the middle, revolvers would have taken over more? Or do you think just the basic functions of a pistol versus a revolver would have made the caliber happen because the pistol's a better machine?
I think the issue of having the advantage of capacity was so obvious that once they worked out the mechanics, there was no going back. But that took a while to get the acceptance of both the military and the police. But once they understood it, there was no going back.
Well, so they go from 38 and then they go to 357, right? And because there's no high power, it's just the 45 over there, and they can't squeeze the capacity in for whatever reason. So they develop 357 first, is what I guess I'm saying. And then all of a sudden there's stopping power, right? We all love stopping power. All of a sudden there's enough potential in 357 that they don't need the magazine capacity. And we never get down that theory of high mag capacity.
That's fine. You know how much time you're going to miss and how many people you're going to be attacked by.
Now, see, I look at this from the other side, because in the timeline you're giving us, the 45 exists. And if somebody's working from the smaller end of the 38 trying to work their way up, there's going to be somebody else working from the larger end trying to work their way down. And I see it being just as logical that somebody takes a look at the 45 and goes, okay, well, capacity is the issue. Let's make the bullet a little bit thinner, and let's make it a little bit longer in the casing to get more power, so that we establish getting both more power and more rounds in there. And I would say that you could almost see the 10mm getting designed right alongside the 357 without the 9.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
A different aspect of development, and that is take like the Quiapo Rhino, which is shooting from the bottom as a revolver from 357. Okay, would we have been able to make better firearms if 357 was the caliber we were going to use, or 45? Better firearms and compensated better if we didn't have the 9mm.
And I think that's kind of what I was asking before too. It's like that one, I'm trying to figure out where that gap, like if you'd removed it, you remove the high power and then you remove like the Glock and some of the guns that made the 9 what it is, then people would have never gone from revolvers, and then they may have gone from 38s to 357s only and been like, we got 7 rounds of 357 and we're done.
I don't know about that. Because the 1911 with the 45 comes into existence. And
you had 32 autos. You had 5.6mm autos. You had a lot of little small autos. So I don't think that would have stopped the autos from keeping on going. And I honestly think they would have had that intermediate stepping stone cartridge to between the 32 and the 45. That's a huge jump.
Yes.
And well, again, even then, like you said, small semi-autos were already in existence, and I think the desire of military wanting that capacity was so strong that they would have either found a way to make the jump, or just something would have had to have given. I don't see them being happy with 7 rounds in a revolver.
And neither do I. No, whether it would be a 357 straight wall or whether it be a 10 millimeter, I don't know, but somewhere in the middle there.
Is it possible that without the evil 9mm round, the world would have just been a more peaceful place? Like the Nazis wouldn't have been created by it, and then there wouldn't have been a World War II, and everybody would have got along. We would have been on the moon and prospecting Mars for gold.
No, because most of the guns that were used in the First World War and the Second World War were full-sized rifles. You know, they were full-size battle rifles. They weren't using that little 9mm happy horse shit.
Using your logic, if John Browning was never born, the prince in Austria never would have been assassinated, and World War I never would have started.
That's a good point.
I don't think any of that. I think if even looking at like Antifa and stuff today, we have a capacity as humans for violence. So we're gonna fight wars, and we're gonna use that no matter what the hell we have. If we're using stones and swords, we kill just as many people.
Yeah, maybe they would have just jumped right to the Illudium blaster, you know, and that would have been, and half the world would be gone.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the handgun, it was the evolution of the handgun that killed the sword. So if we hadn't gotten as far as we did, I don't think we would have stopped killing each other just because we didn't make the 9.
I don't think so. I think that if you would, I think it was just the crowds and city life that killed the sword. It's ineffective and it's inappropriate, and it got in the way and it wasn't useful. And you know, I mean, I think it's the.
Well, yeah, that's why people in cities carried daggers.
That's what I was going to say. People are just going to carry a smaller knife. So if I think the handgun might have killed the development of rifles a bit, but not swords. That's just.
Well, I was talking about in context of war, but yeah.
Do you think we would have got a more effective 22 round?
No, because of rimfire.
I think we just recently got a more effective 22 round.
Oh my god!
What?
Well, look at the 44 Swiss, right? The Vetterli. That's a 44 caliber rimfire.
Well, but when you get a small rimfire, you get more opportunity for a gap in the priming compound. When it's a larger, you know, you got more easy consistency, so it can be a reliable rimfire. But the smallness of it, and it also, the small diameter, the 22, means that the primer isn't as easy to jam in there. There's just lack of material to put a primer cap in, or gap, or whatever slot.
Yeah, it's mechanically difficult to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. So I don't think the 22 would have ever caught on. Now maybe something like the 25 NAA, where they take 25. No, they take whatever, where they neck something down to 22. Like the, what is it? The TCP, the 9mm.
The TCM.
TCM, whatever they're called. They take 223 cases, which work in a 9mm, weirdly, and chop them down and then neck them down to like 22, right? So now you've got a thing that works in a 9mm with a subcaliber barrel to shoot 22. Maybe something like that would have worked, but I think those are more for training and, you know, getting time in a trigger more than a effective round down range.
Yeah, and to this point, back in the day, you know, straight wall cartridge was king back in the day. You know, now they don't care. Now they make all the neck cartridges they want because of the manufacturing technology is so much better.
Didn't they make a rifle that took a shotgun round, the little teeny shotgun round, and 45 and go through the barrel at the same time?
Do what now?
Are you talking about an over-under survival gun where it has a smaller?
No, this is a today thing that was just came out about 3 or 4 years ago. It
Well,
was
Taurus Judge has been doing that for years.
that judge. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a handgun.
That's it.
And that's a piece of crap ever. Everybody I've ever seen that tested the shotgun capability with that, it was laughable. You know, after about 50 feet, you can't hit jack shit with it.
Is this
Yeah,
governor just as poor?
Yeah, they're more well. All right, so the short barrel, the governor, and the short barrel judge. If you're going to use them in any seriousness, they're meant to be up close and personal, nasty kind of. That's why they were called. That's why they were sold as anti-carjacker guns. The idea was you'd be shooting some guy in the face who's trying to get in through your car window. And then the bigger versions, like the Raging Judge, that's really more of a novelty. The idea is, look, you can fire all of these calibers in it, kind of like the old school Medusa. The Medusa was never meant to be taken as seriously as people did. It was just meant to be a cool concept of how many rounds can we make go through one gun.
What I was suggesting is without the 9mm, would they have perfected that type of thing for warfare so that you had the ability to fire multiple rounds out of the same firearm, a multifaceted firearm in a war situation?
I'm not following.
In other words, one of the things that they made, like your M16 takes a NATO round. Your 9mm stuff that they use, they have like a NATO round.
Okay?
Yeah. So that the rounds are interchangeable over different militaries. Would they, without the 9mm, have made something like a rifle that did multiple, shotgun and rimfire cartridges out of the same thing, so that it was a more versatile weapon for more versatile ammos that could be used in a field situation, in a wartime situation?
Well, I kind of take what you said there in two different directions, because I feel like no matter what, there would have been some form of standardization among militaries, like NATO. They just would have picked something besides the 9mm. But in regards to firing multiple calibers through one weapon, there's always been guns designed on some level that have done that through history.
I was talking about, them making a heavier development on that side for, the common fire. What would the AR look like without the 9mm? Even though the AR was not a 9mm weapon, it would have changed the interchangeability with other NATO rounds. Okay, if we didn't have the 9mm, it would have changed everything that we had as well, become compatible.
Well, but see, what you're talking about isn't about whether or not the round existed. You're just talking about if we had never standardized. We could have standardized with anything. It didn't have to be the 9mm.
I think you're right. What you're talking about, Teddy, is just the concept of standardization would have been with some other gun, or would we have not standardized with NATO?
We would have standardized with NATO, but NATO would not have had the 9mm, so it would have changed what we standardized with.
Well, yeah, we'd have just picked some other round.
Correct. Which means that for our interchangeability, we would have changed the rounds we had. I'm just saying, without the 9mm, it might have changed a whole lot more things than we think about when you talk about trying to have interchangeability and everything between your rounds across different platforms.
But like the 9mm development doesn't change the 5.56 development. It doesn't change the 308 development. None of that is altered.
We would have done the same. I would think we would have been in the same trajectory with 45 ACP. We would have never just changed. 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a thought.
I mean, they're different tools for different purposes.
Well, I think you said
I don't see the
9
meaning.
millimeter metric garbage being thrown in there and us making us have to cooperate with a bunch of stupid Europeans. That maybe we would have been free to develop things, like a bunch of free people, and it wouldn't have been a bunch of mines. It would have like the other guns. But like they're saying, we would have just been like, all right, let's all use the 45, and they'd have been like, all right, even though we can barely lift those guns up, we'll use the 45s with you. We would have still had to deal.
Well, keep in mind that Europeans are little people.
Tiny people. Well, that's how when they made the movies about no, actually they don't watch us anymore. They can't watch us because of their little laws that say that their information is part of their human rights or whatever. So good luck trying to make the entire internet change. But anyway, they don't really watch us anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
smaller. And we were all smaller. I was at Dragon Man's checking out his museum. Everybody should go there. Awesome. One of the things he's got is a lot of uniforms. He basically has every uniform from World War II on mannequins there, amongst modern stuff as well. But the older stuff, when you look at the mannequins, he even pointed to say he has to modify the mannequins because their feet were smaller, their heads were smaller. They were just smaller humans back then. We've been eating a lot of healthy food for a couple generations now.
That also makes me wonder, are the Russians still smaller? Because they used to be just as small as the Europeans.
the Russians got big and quickly.
I know are big people. Same as
I mean, the average Russian. I mean, obviously there are big Russians. There's always been big Russians. I don't mean there's Spetsnaz units. I mean just like regular army.
Who's the Google
I don't know.
master? Somebody there is a Google master who would be able to tell us that. I never paid attention all the times I was in Russia. They all seemed about the same as Americans. Some taller, some shorter, but pretty average to what I was used to with normal Americans.
I just vaguely remember hearing something about how the average height was 5'7", where ours was 5'10". Of course, this is back in the early 80s.
So the average height, according to a census that was completed in 2015, the average height is 5'8.5". And then
a little kid throwing in the half.
And then in another part of Russia, because Russia's pretty big, so they did a couple different averages. The average height is 6 foot.
And what is it in America?
Hold on, let me Google that.
Cool. I knew there was a Google master somewhere in this crowd.
It'll be 5'10", 5'11".
And you're right on the money, 5'10", 5'11".
Yep.
Just about the same as what you said for Russians, right?
Well, the Russians are
I said 5'7".
The Russians are basically right below us and right above us.
Yeah, and they're 5'8", but in the good places with the real food, they're 6 foot.
Yeah, so we're literally right between their poor and their wealthy, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't spend too much time giving the communists a bunch of attention and free publicity. Why don't we put this question out there? This is going to be a tough one, and I'll understand if people feel the need to leave the chat after I put this out there. But would there still be a Glock if there was no 9mm?
Yes.
There are many Glocks.
Now there are, but would there still, whatever the transition of events and alignment of stars that needed to take place, and the assortment of guns that he had to choose from, would he have developed a Glock? Would he have been 45, there's no way to contain this kind of firepower in plastic?
Well, in fact, the first Glock might have been a Glock 21.
No, that's what I'm saying, though. Maybe if it wasn't, maybe he said, like, oh, this is too big a bullet. I can't contain this firepower. I'm going to forget this whole idea. And then nobody would have even developed it ever.
I think he was a man looking to make money, and and because he had obviously the drive, he would have used whatever cartridge the Army wanted to use that would, and in order to sell his gun.
I don't remember which one of the many things on Glock I've read had this source in it, but apparently when Glock first started the concept of making his gun, he actually started with a larger caliber. I can't remember what it was, but he actually started with something more powerful than the 9mm, and then he worked his way backwards to the 9mm to make the platform. So it's possible that he would have stopped at something like the 45. But then the question becomes: would the Glock and 45 have been able to get through the trials due to the fact that the Glock and 45 isn't as easy to shoot as the 9? It might have failed accuracy trials given the time.
You went down a Glock and a 38.
Didn't they have a Glock 38 in Europe because they're not allowed to have 9mm?
The 380.
Yeah, 380. That's right.
Yep. I forget what model number it is, but it's one of the missing numbers if you start counting them.
No. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's a model. They still call it a Model 19, but doesn't come with a R19 barrel. It comes with one for theirs or something. I can't remember exactly.
No, it's like a 25 or something. It's one of the ones we don't have.
Is it? Okay.
Model. It's for the countries, like they're saying, that you can't have calibers of war. 9mm means ready for war.
Yeah, that's why the 380 Super is so popular in Mexico.
That's an example of the type of cartridge I was trying to explain. If I would have thought of that earlier, I would have mentioned it. But as far as if 9 was not developed, it would have been something similar to a 38 Super.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
All right. What other ways can we examine a world without the 9mm influence or whatever?
I wonder if the subguns would have come around that quickly.
Well,
I guess because they were using 45s and submachine guns before they were using 9s.
Yeah, but look at how people cry about recoil. Like, would they have been able to handle Uzis? Well, I guess they did make Uzis in 45.
Well, if you look at the grease gun, you got that big giant bolt in there, that mass that's taking any recoil and subduing it.
Yeah, that thing was pretty sweet to shoot.
I mean, that's about as mild as one can get.
Oh, that's actually, it's somebody, Dead Horse just put it out there in the chat. This is an interesting thought. If they hadn't developed 9mm and hadn't started relying on 9mm, what would have happened if they developed something else that had been superior? Would have they still lost?
Yeah, they would have still lost because again, 9mm is a handgun cartridge. Germany didn't depend on the 9mm as a battle rifle cartridge in World War II. Nobody was using. I mean, they weren't even using medium caliber cartridges.
That's a good point. Later, that's a really good point. I mean, a monkey can throw his poop out of a tree and develop a better caliber than 9mm. But you're right. But you're right. The Nazis doesn't matter because they weren't running around shooting people.
It's for
I was more or less trolling the idea that G keeps saying that the 9mm made Nazis. That's all.
Right.
Correlation is not.
I mean, I assume a lot more people would have died when they were shooting them, trying to shoot them to put them in the mass graves. Because I'm sure the 9mm did a lousy job at that.
Or how about this? Since G's you're working with the premise that the 9mm created Nazis. What if they'd created a better caliber and then they'd been better people?
That's what I'm saying. If they would use the wholesome caliber, then they would in peaceful, loving culture over there. No Nazis would have ever happened.
That's like saying the country that developed the nuclear warhead would be the most peaceful, yet they are the ones that actually used it.
Yeah, that's true.
And ironically enough, we're the most peaceful.
Every time it always has to happen. We're just saying, without the negative influence of the 9mm, is it possible the Germans might have blossomed into a wholesome and loving people? That
It
the
would
9mm,
be simple, you know.
they could have been the binding part that kept Europe together through turmoil.
Yeah, I mean, the Swiss, you know, they didn't have no freaking 9mm, and they just tried to stay out of everything and mind their own business.
They just wanted to make their chocolate.
Because my thermonuclear weapon example holds no water.
Well,
No,
I'm gonna put it like
always
this.
has to go one way or the other. We're just saying, like, not just like every time somebody develops a caliber, it's going to be evil. Just the 9mm happened to be in it. Maybe it had influence on the Germans. All right. Well, without the 9mm, would there be as many people shooting? Because it is a fairly popular subcompact semi-auto.
Yes.
That out there, would there be a comparable 380 or something else?
No, it'd be some straight wall cartridge.
Yeah, I think we'd still be looking at 380 and 40, and we'd still pretty much be right where we're at.
Yeah, and some people would prefer the 38 Super, and some people would prefer the 40.
And I would make fun of both of them and tell them to grow up and fire the 10.
Now, have they perfected the 10 yet?
I've been shooting 10 for years and never had a problem with it. Love that round.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. The only problems that I've ever heard them complain about the 10 was with the FBI stuff, and that was because the FBI had a bunch of desk jockeys who couldn't shoot worth a damn anyway. So, yeah.
And that's dead air right there.
Well,
All right. I mean, all right, I'm done here. So,
how do you follow that statement?
My statement was that the only real bad thing that you hear about the 10mm was how accuracy trials for the FBI fell off after they tried to switch to it. The problem was they didn't take all field agents with firearms training and say, these are all our good marksmen. These are the people that actually train with guns. They took all the desk jockeys into the account of that. And yes, the scores throughout the Bureau went down. And then they created the 10mm FBI load, which eventually they just turned into the 40.
So the 10 is a big abusive round, dude. It's a huge round, makes the guns big in order to not fall apart.
Yeah, I'm not denying any of that. I'm saying there's nothing wrong with the round, though.
No, there's nothing wrong with the round. But when you're talking about giving it to a bunch of people, when you start talking about these guns that are frames that have multiple grips or whatever, like, you know, the frame is like that internal rail system, and the grip is like really the lower, and you know, you can have the one frame and you could, you know, issue it with 3 different lowers, 3 different grip angles, or have straps or back straps or something that change grip angles, you know, all that.
But now you're adding to what he said. He said there was something wrong with the round. I defended that aspect of it.
Okay. Right.
So what we've established is without the 9mm, the FBI would be better shooters because they would be using the 10.
No, I'm not saying that. I didn't say that at all. I just said that there was nothing wrong with the 10 and that the 10 got horrible press because of what happened with the FBI. I still think they would have ended up with the 40.
I think if they just widely educated, you know, the troops that if you determine somebody's wearing body armor, only do headshots.
You know, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. You know, it's not like just because 9mm is not there, we have to stay with the same paradigm and the same timeline and, you know, just change the caliber out. Things might have been different, right?
Oh, we could have a whole. I mean, they could have created some weird caliber that doesn't even exist that would have been a replacement for the 9.
Well, let me put this potential cause of events out there. So they never make the stupid 9mm garbage, and 45 dominates, and we pretty much, the 1911 dominates that. And gun culture, guns in general, just kind of stick with 1911s. The same ways that you don't see a lot of development in lever actions anymore. Winchester made a bunch, Marlin made a couple, Savage made one, and then boom, you got pretty much all your lever actions, right? Henry comes along and makes a few here and there, but there's no like Smith & Wesson's trying to build a better lever, or so-and-so comes along. For the most part, levers are done. What would have happened if pistols would have happened like that? The 1911 would have just established itself as being the shit, and everybody would have been like, yeah, let's just make, a race gun 1911, or a small 1911, or a double stack 1911. And what
So you don't.
but would that be a lot different? Would it be a smaller industry? We would be boring and we'd all just be buds?
Well, I'm curious why you think striker fire would have never come around.
Since it started World War One.
Well, I don't think I'm suggesting that as much as, well, I guess I kind of am. I guess, yeah, the lack of development would have meant, like, 1911 I would just stay there, and I guess that isn't what I'm saying. So, yeah, I mean, striker fire was first, but if stupid 9mm wouldn't have come along and become one of the most popular guns, calibers for this new striker fire Glock, because 1911s were just, taking care of business all over the world.
But they always were weak when it came to the capacity issue. How many times are you going to miss, and how many attackers are you going to have? You don't know that, and that's why 7 rounds is not necessarily going to work in the majority of circumstances.
Well, okay, it's two things. It's capacity and it's mag changes. And with the single stack 45 mag, even though it's a wide caliber, it's not the easiest mag well to find and insert a single stack mag into. But when you start double stacking it, have you ever shot a double stack 1911 yet?
Yep.
No, I have not.
So you can imagine, you get a thing it's not quite as wide as two 45s, but they're double stacked, they're kind of staggered. So basically what it gives you is a magazine that's double stacked with a kind of a wedge top, right? That goes up to the lips into one in the middle instead of 2 staggered. And then the mag well, of course, is much bigger. So now you've given yourself a couple or more rounds, maybe a round or 2 on a 45, depending on the grip length. But more importantly, you've given yourself a bigger mag well and a mag that has a wedge shape to it. So now mag changes are a lot easier on a double stack 45. I carry double stack 45 in Glock right now, and it's one thing I noticed even from my 40. It's like a big giant hole. I got a giant hole I can jam in.
The follow-on question I have to what you stated, and I don't have the answer because I don't know the numbers, is because people come with small, medium, and large hands. It's because you are significantly increasing the grip size. Are the vast majority of your, whether it be agents or soldiers or whoever it is you're supplying to, going to be able to actually reach and put their pad of their finger on the trigger? Or are they just going to be able to barely touch it? And I don't have the answer to that, but all I know is people come with different size hands.
No, that's a valid point, and I think that's probably one of the reasons 9 sits around being lazy and sitting where it's sitting, because it's so short, and that's why the 10s and stuff definitely fail, because the 45 is a nice spot for that, because its length, overall length, I guess, isn't so wide that it stops it from being a double stack. It can't be a double stack as much as a 9mm, but you can still double stack it and get a little bit more into the mag than Browning ever bothered with.
Well, I think first off, I think striker fire still would have come around because there's still that market that wanted to get rid of the exposed hammer, so that still would have been created at some point. They might have just been metal framed. More so, we've never maybe gone to the polymer soon.
Have you ever seen a striker fire 1911? A 1911 with no hammer?
I thought the striker fire was 1903.
Well, no, but I mean, in the development of the 1911 at the Browning Museum, there is an example of a 1911
okay.
fire that he developed and decided to pass on. I got a picture of it. It's kind of neat looking.
Well, my point was is I think the biggest thing that would have been a desire for them to want to find something adequate, and you say that in quotations, and smaller, wasn't just the capacity of what's in the magazine, but I think it comes down to a logistics game with the bean counters. How many rounds can they ship? How many rounds can a soldier carry? How much is it going to cost them to move that product?
Yeah. Well, logistics is always a question with the bean counters, because that even comes to, should we even change platforms at all because of the crossover training costs and so forth. So that's always an issue. It's never not an issue.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that could have also been one of the reasons why we ended up with the 9mm. Was there somebody in the logistics side of it who was pushing that?
That's partially why police hung on to revolvers for as long as they did, was the cost of changing over.
I agree.
And not just the hardware and the ammunition, the training. And then older officers that probably didn't want to change. They liked their revolvers the way it was.
Well, I'm just curious, since we're talking about a situation where the 9 is out of the equation. I'm wondering if they would have stayed with the 45, or if there would have been such a demand on the logistics side of things for a smaller caliber because of logistic reasoning that they made something.
I think there definitely would have been more playing around with what I'll call creating light loads for the 45. Whether that's using instead of always going to a 230 ball, maybe going to a 200 grain projectile, and then going to maybe a slightly lighter power load. For the situations that didn't necessarily need a 230 grain ball with full power.
Can I just make a note here? Sorry, we've been asked so that we don't offend any of the 9mm, that we're not supposed to use the words light load. We don't.
Jesus.
Okay, loaded down. Reduced powder load.
Are you trying to say people that use 9mm are light in their loafers and you can't mention that?
They're lightly loaded. It's just a fact. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. I just didn't want to offend anyone.
God. I am so glad I live where I live. I don't have to worry about that shit. There is no political correctness.
Trying to think what other 9mm stuff is out there. Would it have changed the development of pistol caliber ARs?
Well, yeah, they'd all come in 10mm and 45.
Would they be 10 though? Did 10 work in there?
I mean, there's no reason that you can't use other calibers now. If there was enough of the demand, I'm sure they could use a 380 through an AR.
Well, but yes, since we know the 10 gets developed and the 40's going to be around, so instead of having a 9mm, they jump straight to the 40.
It's not direct impingement; it's just blowback action, but it looks like an AR.
I mean, honestly, just by taking out the one caliber, as far as development goes, I don't see it changing a whole lot across any platform. Maybe some stuff gets built a little heavier, or maybe because they start with a smaller caliber or a weaker caliber, stuff starts off a little lighter, but I don't see it overall changing anything mechanically.
Yeah, I agree.
But okay, so the development of the 9 in Germany at the time was that they felt that they were a superior race, and therefore everything that they designed was superior in the world.
Are you sure you're not thinking World War II?
I'm thinking it started.
This is pre-World War I.
Well, I'm saying, if it was pre-World War I, but I'm talking about there still was a German rise in World War I. Okay, and yes, it was carried out more efficient, more dramatically in World War II with Hitler. But I'm saying, if the Germans, who today still think they're the best engineers in the world, okay, if they weren't able to create their own caliber and their own stuff, what would they have created if it wasn't a 9mm?
So in other words, even if we take the timeline and remove 9mm from it, the Germans were still going to make something. So what would they have made instead of the 9mm?
Correct. Something that they felt that they had to change it from the calipers we
Well,
had.
Before
They
they
would
had,
have.
didn't they have 7.62 in a bottleneck cartridge for their
Well, I'll put. I don't know if that.
That's a Tokarev. Tokarev's a 7.62 by 25. That's a Russian round, isn't it?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'll
The
look it up.
Nazis really didn't develop calibers as much as take over countries and take their calibers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll play devil's advocate to that. Then fine. If they're going to create something, who's to say they just didn't create the 38 Super or some other 38 straight wall variant and go on from there? Since we already said that if we eliminated the 9mm, that's what we'd have developed. So why couldn't have they just skipped and developed that instead of the 9?
Okay, the original cartridge was 7.63 by 25 in the broom handle Mauser. So that's what they probably would have used other than the 9mm because they already had it.
That makes a good point. I think we already did this one. Have we done? We have not done this one. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I don't know how much we need to go on. I think we pretty much know that if they wouldn't have developed it, then they would have just, worked around it or something else. I think we've talked about it. They would have just kept going with the stuff that was there. But the world would have been a better place. We can all agree on that. But if anybody in the audience, what we're trying to do here is attempt at the new media. So we are trying to make this a conversation with the audience. We've been kind of playing around with everybody in the chats up till now, but if anybody wants to keep throwing stuff in there, feel free. I was going to dig into our gun shop of the day, though. So one of the reasons we call it the Daily Gun Show is so that we can feature a gun shop every single day. And just recently been out on the road, driving around looking at gun shops. So I'm going to take a look at a shop that I found. In Vegas called Wild West Guns. So has anybody heard of Wild West Guns before? They do these breakdown, what do they call them, guide guns. So they're lever actions and high caliber. They're stainless steel, and they break apart right there.
That looks beautiful.
Yeah, they're really, really neat. And they're big calibers, 4570 and bigger.
This is in Vegas?
Yeah, they're in Vegas. They started out in Alaska, and for years ever since I've been going to SHOT Show in 2006, I think, is the first time I remember seeing them. And then every other place I've ever been, NRA show, anywhere there's guns, they've been there. And they set up their booth and they do their thing. They're kind of unique. I think they originally started modifying existing probably Winchesters because they got side. Or no, that's Winchesters on the side. But then now I think they actually make their own. I don't really keep up with them, but I've always thought they were neat. And it's like I say, I see them all the time. And I just like the idea of a break apart lever action. It seems awesome, right?
Do you have a link to that by any chance?
A link to their shop? Yeah, I can get one.
Yeah.
So they've got,
it's too cool.
yeah, and then they're Vegas, so maybe you get some kind of discount because you're in Nevada. So I just went to their Instagram, and then from their Instagram I went to their website. So there it is. We'll throw that over into the gun channel chat over here.
Okay, it's over in the gun channel site.
Well, no, I'm giving it to you right here in the end as well. But I'm just explaining to the audience that might be watching up there what I'm doing as I flip through screens, and then I'll put it on the YouTube side. We only use YouTube because people on YouTube would freak out if we immediately started using gun channels, GunTube. But GunTube can broadcast and embed it over on gun channels, so we'll be going to GunTube soon. Here's a picture on their website, though, of what I was talking about. The gun breaks down into two pieces. Just super cool. Anyhow, so I visited the shop. Like I said, I knew they were in Alaska, and I knew they had something in Vegas, but I just assumed it was, I don't know, maybe a little storefront or something. But went in there. They have a big sign that says no pictures. I almost always ask anyway if the shop seems cool, and they said, "Yep, no problem. Go ahead and take pictures." That is up there so that just random people don't come in and start taking pictures. But anyway, they were more than happy to let me take some pictures, so I did. And it's a big place. It's a tough place to take pictures of. It's like a large building, I guess, a large room. So I went around and took some pictures from just some different angles. Let's see. They had some interesting used stuff there, like this old Colts conversion kit, and a lot of taxidermy. So a couple of used guns there, and this will give you some idea how big a place is. Big old standalone building. I didn't get a good picture of it because I don't have a photo. I'm going to have to try to pull it from my dash cam, but they also have some billboards in town. And Vegas obviously is a tourism town. So seeing billboards that say Wild West Guns and have a really cool picture of lever action up there, it's just cool. I like the idea of seeing billboards. It's that subliminal, just people realize that guns are part of our culture. And it's not in your face if they don't care. I mean, or if they don't, they're not into the guns. They're just seeing a billboard. Just like if you see a billboard for motorcycles or guitars and you're not interested in it, you don't get offended. I think having gun billboards out there is an effective way of keeping guns in society, and kind of a resistance against the agenda that the big media would like to push out there, right? So anyway, I think that part was cool, but I couldn't get a picture of their billboard. But anyway, that was a neat shop, and I would encourage people to check it out. If you're in Vegas for, in Las Vegas for any amount of time, it's definitely an Uber away from the strip. But if you've got a rental, it's just a few blocks off the strip, so it's definitely doable. If you're interested in just taking a vigorous walk, depending on the time of year, it's literally walking distance. If you're interested in taking an actual walk, it might be a couple of 3-4 miles. But anyway,
Looks like you can order online as well.
Gee, that's a gun shop that I haven't been into Vegas yet. So I thank you for sharing that. Next time I'm in town, I'm gonna have to go visit it.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, you'll find it no problem. They got billboards and stuff, so they're all over the place. There's one nearby that we'll have to do a special show, or a show specifically for Nevada shops with both of you guys actually, so that we can kind of cover some of the other shops in Nevada. This one's in Nevada too. Guns and guitars.
Guitars and guns, yeah.
I got a question for you. You were showing some lever actions before, and I thought I read somewhere that until Hollywood started promoting it for movie reasons, that there weren't really those big looped lever actions.
I can't imagine why anybody want to loop lever action really, except for maybe this size for mittens, because this one isn't huge. This is just larger for mittens or something. But the big obnoxious loop, it hurts. I don't know why people, and it doesn't work. I don't know why people want it. It's
actually the guns built in the 1800s did not have those big loops.
I don't honestly that, because guys were handy and they could melt metal, so they would make their own loops if they wanted.
The Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Those were commonplace because of the trick shooters.
For trick shooting.
The loops were used for spinning the guns and things like that.
Okay.
So I know that they were at least in use for those shows. I don't know if they started it or anything, but
and maybe that's because I can't remember exactly where I read this article, because it was talking about Hollywood and obviously those shows are part of what I'll call pre-Hollywood, but for entertainment purposes, for doing tricks and things like that, like the Rifleman is
right.
For if anybody remembers that TV show.
I do remember the Rifleman. It was the only cowboy show at the time where the sheriff carried anything other than a single action.
I love that show.
And actually, that is what the large loop lever action was designed for. It was designed for cowboys. 1892 Winchester was the first large loop lever action.
Okay, well, you say for cowboys, for you mean cowboys doing tricks or cowboys working the range?
No. Cowboys, premier rifle for looking out for the safety of livestock.
Interesting.
If you're wearing gloves, it would be important to have a large loop.
Yep, because most of those guys wore heavy leather gloves.
Well, maybe a larger loop, like we were just looking at on the Wild West guns. Yeah. But what I'm reading here is I just typed in big loop on lever guns history. I found this thing from True West magazine, written in 2011, and it says John starts out with the question: John Wayne used a large loop lever on his rifles in several movies and TV's. Riflemen used it as early as 1958. Was it ever used in real life? Then there's an answer to him, and it says, I've never seen anything or read anything in my research on Old West firearms that mentions these large loop revolvers. Guns and Western expert Jim Dunham concurs, saying, I know of no historical use of the expanded size rifle levers. The story I heard was that it was the idea of famous stuntman Yakima Cannon, who suggested that Wayne, as a big man with big hands, could handle it better. The Chuck Connors, who played the rifleman, was also a big man. Both guns were Winchester Model 1892 carbines in 4440. So they're saying that it was literally a Hollywood thing, like Dan was saying.
Huh. I could be wrong.
But
They made a large carbine in 1892. It's not that they took an 1892 and modified it for the movies. So I dispute that.
well, hold on. Both guns were Winchester carbines, yeah. But I'm saying there's this style, where'd that thing go, where it's like enlarged. But then there's the one from the TV show is like obnoxious, right? What's that guy's name?
Yeah, Chuck Connors, yeah.
The TV show one was larger.
I think it dates this crowd if all of us have watched The Rifleman when it was airing.
You know what I'm saying? His is like obnoxiously large. So I think that those were done back in the day for the weird stuff. But all I'm saying is when I've seen these modern, ones with giant rings like this, I think it's not Henry. I think it's the South American ones that make a giant loop one. I've seen them come through the shop, and I've tried to open them, just check them to see if they're empty. And imagine your hand has to travel all that distance before it even engages the lever, and then you got to bring it way forward than normal. Like, that may not seem like a lot in that picture, but when it's 6 inches different than what you're used to on a lever gun, that's just awkward and weird. And you end up holding this, not like you normally, like this guy's doing with the guns in a fast or whatever, but you end up like doing it from here, and it's just awkward. So I don't know why people do it other than look.
Huge loop there.
Well, this is the TV one. This is the TV one, but I contend that this is probably more like what they made in the 1800s for people with gloves, because this is useful. This you can actually, it's just a little bit larger. It doesn't conform like some of them conform to the stock. It's the opposite. But it doesn't. But it's so much larger than the levers.
It's also oval versus circular.
Yeah, that's basically the difference. But the thing is, I've seen old guns where, like, looking at old guns on tables at gun shows where you can tell somebody just added metal to it and made it bigger. And that was, from the old guys telling me, that was like the style of the time or something. They did it back in the day.
So in the lever action, they make two different actions. One is sort of a half cock action, so you're only traveling a little bit and it does it. And one is a full cock action where you have to go all the way forward and back in order to do it. But they make one that's only halfway. You only have to go halfway and it loads the bullet to it.
I cannot unsee that picture of that baby you put up there.
That's not a baby. That could be insulting. That's just a 9mm shooter. Look at it. It has full hands. That's not a baby. It has a neck and everything. It's just an unhappy 9mm shooter.
It's like a fetus or something.
Hey, we're not here to judge 9mm shooters, Dano. We're here to have a conversation. All right, so we've talked about a gun shop of the day.
He says that after he used me and abused me.
Hey, I want to tell you, that was a cool gun shop moment, though. I think that was the king of the night, was that thing to that gun shop. I think that really made the learning curve of the evening well worth it.
Yeah. Sure can't tell he doesn't need Dano anymore.
All right, so Well, actually, we should talk off air because we're trying to bring the tactical quiz back here at some point. $625 worth of stuff at gun shows, and I'll be sending that stuff out to Patreons randomly. But I'd also like to get the tactical quiz going. Send some of that stuff out as thank yous to people that participate in the live show as well. So we'll continue to burn candles from both ends, and I figured out a way to add a third end to the candle. You whittle some out of the middle and light the wick right in the middle there, so you can get it burning 3 ways. And we'll continue to do stuff like that. So thanks for sticking with us, people that are interested in it, people that are supporting the show, and those 6 people out there that decided to thumb it down. That's awesome, because really what that does is when people see this show and all the other shows that are out there and they see, oh, there's 13 thumbs up, so they don't know that 24 people are watching and that a good 12 people or something were stealing the show, but they see that 13 people thumbed it up, and then they go 6 people thumbed it down. 6 different people thumbed that down. So what I'm going to do is go watch that show, because I can't wait to figure out what's so controversial about what they said in there. So thanks to the people that thumb it down, all 6 of you. That really does help out our viewership. We've noticed our views go up now that we've had those people out there, that team of people that don't like the show. And thanks to the people, well, 13 of you at least, that thumbed it up. So with that, we'll say thanks to you guys. I know that Dog's got the book you just did. Ellis just showed. You got anything else going on to promote the book?
Nothing too much right now. People want to check out the book for themselves or are looking to have a conversation about dog stuff, they can always go over to muscledogmafia.com, and it's completely free for them to use over there. And after they come there, they can click the link at the top of the page and go and join gun channels while they're at it.
Right on. And you should do more of those things, because that's how, from what I understand, that's how the word gets out there, and book gets home, make a bunch of money. Another dog gets more chains. Process.
Always need more chain, always need more dog.
Ted, you got anything going on? Do anything awesome?
No, I'm still a non-existent person. So
Right on.
I'll
Thanks
stay
for
that way. Maybe
Right
in
on.
about 2 more weeks, I'll become an existent person.
Well, right on. Thanks for jumping in. Interesting to have your input into the show.
Well,
And
it's always fun. You guys are great.
we got Cycle again. Thanks for sticking up being up so late. It's got to be pretty late for you out there. And it sounds like we're about to. You guys are saying we're about to switch time things or whatever it's called.
This weekend.
It's
Sunday. Saturday into Sunday, I think, right?
So then, I don't change. So for me, I got to figure it out. So I don't know if that means I'm going to be flipping to where it's earlier for you guys. Well, I guess it's always the same for you guys. If it's at midnight Eastern, it's at midnight Eastern. For me, it's going to be 9 to 10, and I don't remember if it's flipping. I guess it's flipping from 9 to 10, so it'll be an hour later.
We turn.
No, it'd be an hour earlier.
We turn the clocks back. We fall back.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but I'm still saying, like, the show is always at midnight. So I guess to you, it's still going to be on late no matter what. For me, it's an hour later. So I don't know if I like that or not. But anyway, it is what it is. So, again, Cycle, I appreciate you sticking up for it and putting your input into it. And, again, we're planning on having a 20-minute show. Well, I guess I didn't thank Dano. So I guess I have to thank Dano also.
Yeah, and as I said at the beginning of the show, Mr. 9mm.
You should get that vest you're talking about getting, but on the back, have it embroidered or whatever with like Mr. 9mm.
Mr. 9mm.
People are gonna be like, Mister, like I need a 9mm socket for this water pump. You'll be like, wrong kind of 9mm, buddy.
Actually, 10 is more common.
Actually, yeah, I can do my whole front end of my van, I think, with like 13 and 10.
That's true.
So anyhow, thank everybody for sticking around, and we will be back tomorrow. Oh, I was saying that we're going to eventually have the earlier shows, so stay tuned for those. These will follow up with them. And if you want to join the panel, be part of the show, head over to Gun Channels, a community built to foster collaboration and encourage people to participate in Second Amendment content creation from the ground up.